Ultimately, somatic intelligence is really about experiencing vitality. How do we experience that sense of full aliveness that requires us to be deeply connected? Ultimately, somatic intelligence is really about experiencing vitality, right? Like this, you just said aliveness, and it made me think about our final competency. What do we even mean when we're talking about somatic intelligence?
We're so familiar with the intelligence of the mind, and this is really about the intelligence of the body. It's like the innate, tapping into the innate wisdom that actually exists in our physiology.
As an educator and as a student myself growing up, I never was taught to honor or to listen to or to regulate my body. That was literally just not in the conversation. And that impacted me so deeply. I remember feeling all bottled up inside and having like anxious tension inside my body. And I didn't know what to do with it because no one ever told me what skills were actually available for me. And I remember as a teacher too, having so much just like, I struggled deeply to show up for my students when there was so much dysregulation in my classroom. I mean, different behaviors were popping in. I was seeing students outbursts going on all the time. I had students that were shut down, overwhelmed, and that made me shut down, overwhelmed. And I started acting out in ways that I wouldn't have wanted to as an educator. And it wasn't until I started to recognize the power of understanding to and connecting to my own body and supporting students in doing the same, what we call at Breathe for Change, somatic intelligence, that my whole world of teaching and learning changed for me and my whole life changed. And Adriana, I feel so lucky to have you here today on the podcast because you are not only a dear, dear friend of mine, but you also are one of the greatest experts that I know in somatic intelligence. And you happen to literally coach me on a weekly basis. I'm so lucky in these somatic practices. And I feel like even through the work that we've done and that we've done in collaboration through Breathe for Change and co-creating the somatic intelligence curriculum, like, wow, you have taught me the world. And I would love for you to share your story of coming into your own body with us. Like, how did you even become, who you are today in relationship to somatic intelligence?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's such a pleasure to get to be here with you and so fun to get to collaborate in all the ways that we do. And yeah, when I think about like what brought me to care so deeply about somatic intelligence, it feels like it's been a journey of actually like for so long resisting the body and realizing over time that there was no alternative but to learn the language of it. And for me, that started, I grew up in a family where there was a lot of violence and like a very tumultuous space. And the result of that for me was I internalized a lot of the fear, a lot of the pain, a lot of the discomfort, and it showed up psychosomatically for me in my body. I started to have a lot of physical pain, including a lot of gut issues, a lot of GI issues, and then eventually a pancreatic tumor that I ended up having to have removed at the age of 24, which thank God when they found it and were able to remove it, they discovered that within a couple of years, it actually would have become malignant based on the type of tumor it was. And it was a huge wake-up call for me because I could see so clearly how there was a disconnect between the way that I was living and what my body was actually needing and asking from me. And there was this sense of like my body is an obstacle or my body is something I need to overcome. I remember for so much of my life feeling like my body was in the way of me living my purpose rather than actually seeing how deeply my body was a source of wisdom and an ally that was trying to bring me into deeper connection with myself so that I actually could live more on purpose. And so after many years of just trying my
resistance,
to will myself
fight the body,
like override it, manage it, which I think so many of us do every day. It's, and in fact, it's like what we're taught is.
Well, in schools, I mean, as educators, we're taught we need to manage students' bodies and they need to manage their own bodies.
Sit still, don't move, don't fidget, like just be this still, calm being and focus and memorize. And at least that's what I remember
100%.
as being a student. And the truth is that our bodies are always communicating where there's harmony, but also where there's disharmony in the body, where there's a call for healing, a need for balance. And as far as my journey goes, like there was something that was being asked of me during that time that slowly, very slowly, I began to surrender into. And the more that I have chosen to invest my energy in really learning to speak this beautiful like language, right? Just like English or Spanish or Mandarin, our body has its own language and it's constantly speaking to us. And the question is, are we listening?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the more that I've learned to really come into contact and understanding of what this world, what this universe in here is speaking to me moment to moment, the more access I have to me, to all of me.
Mm-hmm. And you inspire me so deeply, the way that in your presence, you're just like so fully expressed. And I can sense by literally being around you, like what is happening in your body becomes then expressed outside your body. And it's like in the relational field, it makes such a big impact.
Mm.
And I think about, wow, what would it look like in schools if every single educator had that similar connection to their body and it through that embodied experience themselves could model and teach students how to like really connect to and listen to the wisdom of their own bodies. Like education would look fundamentally different. And so I want to geek out with you for a moment on what somatic intelligence is. So for the listeners who don't already know, at Breathe for Change, we've developed what we call the human intelligence framework, and it has 5 layers. It has the cognitive intelligence layer, which I would argue there's cognitive overload in schools already. This is the overemphasis of what we educate our students in. There's the social or relational layer, there's the emotional layer, and there's what we call universal layer, kind of our connection to something greater than ourselves or our purpose. And then there's this somatic layer. And we felt it was so critically important to ensure that the somatic piece is included in what we're prioritizing in schools with us as educators in terms of our own embodiment, as well as like what are the skills and competencies and practices that we're teaching our students. And I want to turn to you for a moment to kind of unpack just at a high level, what do we even mean when we're talking about somatic intelligence?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. And, we're so familiar with the intelligence of the mind, and this is really about the intelligence of the body. It's like the innate tapping into the innate wisdom that actually exists in our physiology. That's, like I said, another language that's always happening to us, that's signaling both our needs, it's signaling our longings, it's signaling the places where we are incongruent, the places where there's a desire for connection. All of this is always being communicated in the different ways that the body is expressing itself to us. So this thing that we call somatic intelligence is really about coming into deeper contact with that intelligence and allowing it to inform the way that we live, the way that we relate, the way we experience ourselves, and the way that we bring ourselves fully into the world. It has so much to do actually with authenticity, because when we can really source from that somatic intelligence that's inside of us, it allows us to come into deeper alignment with self and activate so much more of our life force energy and our aliveness.
Mm. And ultimately, somatic intelligence is really about experiencing vitality, right? Like this, you just said aliveness, and it made me think about our final competency within our curricular progression, and that is somatic intelligence of vitality, right? How do we experience that sense of full aliveness? And that requires us to be deeply connected to our bodies. So can you talk a little bit more about how you think about vitality as it relates to somatic intelligence?
Yeah. In so many ways, vitality is like letting our natural life force energy move through us freely. And that means like that what that requires of us, I guess it feels important to speak to that too. In the realm of vitality, it requires that we digest the experiences that we have that can create blocks in our in the flow of our vital life force energy. So as we digest that, it keeps our energy current clear so that we can be congruent. We can show up authentically, not because we're deciding to mentally, but because our field is clear. So all of us has the ability to express, not based on things that have happened in the past, because our body's no longer stuck in the past. When we can bring it into a current state where there aren't all these blockages, but instead we are current, then the wholeness of ourselves has an ability to express and to move. So vitality is really the ability to meet our life experiences and ourselves moment to moment with what's needed in the moment to keep that current clear and bright so that our vitality can sustain throughout the course of our lives.
Oh, so beautiful. Keeping us connected, bright. As you were speaking, you were taking me through our journey of the 5 competencies that we've developed at Breathe for Change around somatic intelligence specifically. That first competency being interoception, like our ability to be aware of our own sensations that are showing up in our body. And then that second competency of attunement, actually listening to what our body is telling us about what we might need or want, or what boundaries we might need to create in the moment. And then that third competency talked about like regulation, right? How do we then give ourselves what we need, which then leads to the fourth competency of co-regulation, our ability to be in relationship with each other and have our own regulation then support another person's regulation or a whole group of people. And all of that leads to vitality. So I would love to just take some time to break down each of these competencies that you and I have spent thousands of hours just unpacking, thinking about the theory, the science, and then what are some actual tangible practices and skills that we can teach our educators to embody and teach to their students. Let's just start from the foundations, which is that first competency of interoception. For those listening, I'm imagining you're like, intro what, right? Interoception, what is that? So can you just talk about what is interoception in a way that we can understand, especially those of us who don't know what that word means?
Yeah, interoception is really the process of tuning in with the bodily signals, right? So it's starting, you can think about the bodily signals that we have as like the raw data. In a lot of ways, our body's communication system, the way that it expresses, was the first language that we ever learned. Like we didn't come into the world being able to speak in English or Spanish or whatever language it was that we learned. We felt. We were in touch with our sensory experience.
I experience that every single day with my 2 and 4-year-old, especially when they were little. It's like they don't have words, but they definitely are expressing what's going on inside through crying, through screaming, through smiles, and all of that is coming from their sensations.
Absolutely. And so interoception is really this process of making connection with or coming into contact with the different signals that are always there, right? And some of us might be more accustomed to noticing certain signals over others, right? Maybe you notice when your heart rate increases, but at the same time, if you bring your attention to your finger and really rest your attention there, you're likely going to start to sense different sensation that's there too. So it's the process of just noticing what are the signals that the body's giving, and doing so without analysis, without evaluation, like really from a non-judgmental place, just uh, observing and being able to pick up on all those subtle details of the subtle experiences that are happening internally.
So all of what you just said sounds brilliant and amazing. And also it's like still in the cognitive for me, right? We can talk about these things all day, but somatic intelligence is really about experiencing and feeling it and having this embodied journey with the practice. And so would you mind just like guiding us through maybe a 30-second practice of us like doing what you're saying is interoception?
Yeah. And one thing I want to just say is, so many of us for so many years have been overriding our bodies, right? I spoke to that before, but so many of us have been so disconnected that actually when we start to first bring our attention back and start to try and sense the signals, sometimes it can feel quiet, right? Or it can actually feel uncomfortable to bring our attention internal in this way. So I just want to name, before we go into a mini experience, just to say, like, it's okay. Whatever you are able to tune in with or whatever you're not, it's all good. And this is just an invitation to start to develop a little bit more of a connection with your body in this moment. So we'll see what opens through that.
Great.
So with that said, if you're driving, you can keep your eyes open. If you're home or anywhere else, you can just find a position that feels comfortable to you. Eyes can be open or closed, and just take a moment first to bring attention to your breath. Just sensing and feeling the quality of your breath. Is it fast? Is it smooth? Are there disruptions or pauses in the inhale? Or does it feel natural and easy or effortful? Just sensing and noticing the different textures of your breath. Maybe you notice the temperature. And now start to bring awareness and attention to your chest, sensing and feeling what you are aware of there. Is there a sense of spaciousness and ease? Is there tightness or contraction? Maybe one part of your chest feels relaxed while another feels tight. Maybe there's a way in which you can feel the breath moving into your chest. So just simply bringing awareness to what you sense here. There might be a texture or an image that emerges too, just welcoming whatever is here. And then next and lastly, just take a moment to see if you can notice one other sensation in your body. It could be in your toe, your elbow, your face, your throat. So just seeing where in your body is there a sensation that's speaking to you that you might not have noticed before. And once again, take note of the different qualities that you're picking up on. Maybe there's a temperature to it, a relaxation or tightness, a sense of spaciousness or ease. So just how would you describe, without judgment, what you're noticing here? So it's just data, it's raw data. So can you allow all of your being to take it in without needing to analyze or make sense of it yet? And with that, if your eyes are closed, you can slowly open them.
That was so beautiful, Adriana. And you know, I think as educators, our capacity to engage in this practice on a consistent basis of tuning in, like really what is happening in my body right now? it gives us so much information. And that's really what leads us to that second competency of attunement, right? Like attuning to what is this information telling me about what I might need or what I might want or what I might desire, or what boundaries I might need to create right now. And I think about our students learning these skills, right? Because right now, students aren't taught to one, even pay attention to their bodies, but then also to befriend their bodies and see them literally as a companion. Oh, what do you need right now? So can you talk a little bit more about this second competency of attunement and how it relates to what you just did with us?
Yeah. So interoception is that raw data, right? So it's the body signals. And then when we move into attunement, it's really about starting to make sense of, not from the mind, but start to understand, to comprehend what are these signals actually revealing to us about our needs, about what's happening for us, our experience. And, it's important to note that the way that we interpret what's our inner world often has to do with, different emotional patterning we've had for a long time. It has to do with culture. It has to do with neurobiology. There's so many different things that are affecting how we often interpret what we're sensing within ourselves, right? And so attunement is really a slowing down. And so many of us are moving so fast that like we've over the course of our lives made these quick associations around what things mean, right? There's tightness in our chest. Oh, I must be anxious, or I'm flush. Oh, I must be embarrassed. But the truth is that a lot of these bodily signals actually can mean very different things. So attunement is about really listening deeply. It's about bringing a level of curiosity to our inner experience and to our bodily signals that allow us to start to sense the deeper truth, right? Not the most surface level thing that's most familiar to us, but like, what is capital T true in this moment? And there's so much discernment that is involved in that process. And so because most of us don't have this skill, when we're first learning it, especially when we're first learning it, we need to slow down, right? It's similar to like I was a soccer player when I was a kid for a long time, and I wasn't ready to get fancy on the field for a long time. I needed to just like do drills, and I needed to practice to refine my skill set so that I could actually more effectively engage on the field when I was playing, and it became easeful, right? But I say that because so many of us are operating with so much urgency that we like tune in with our bodies and we want the answer right away.
I mean, that's me. I'm your client.
You have none of that.
Yeah, I have none. Attunement is like my greatest challenge in life. It's like, okay, there's tension, sure, but let's keep going. And I think as educators, we have so many tasks to complete, to-do lists to check off, students to interact with, support, manage. It's like attunement. What? Yeah. But it gives us so much information. And what I find so powerful is that it actually allows for regulation to become possible. And there's so much dysregulation in the world, and it shows up so deeply in our classrooms. And I remember through my dissertation research, one of my teachers I was following into her first year of teaching was like, when I am stressed, my students are stressed. Or when I am calm and collected, my students are calm and collected. What they were actually saying is, when I'm dysregulated, my students are dysregulated. Or when my students are dysregulated, then I become dysregulated, and vice versa. And the same is true for regulation. So can you talk a little bit more about how all of this connects to regulation? Because everyone talks about regulation in education. But what's actually happening in our bodies? What's the science of regulation?
Yeah. So what we're aiming for, and I think there's been a misconception around this in education and in the world for a long time, but what we're aiming for is to have our nervous systems be in a state where we can internally feel a sense of safety that allows us to have more presence and more connection available. So we want to access our capacity, right? Our capacity to meet life with flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
So when we lose our flexibility, it's usually a sign that we've actually like fallen out of a state of regulation. And so when we're in our window of regulation, we can think about that as our window of tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
And our window of tolerance is really the place where we have the capacity to meet life with presence, from a place of connection, from a place of flexibility. But all of our windows of tolerance are different. It depends on the life experiences we've had. It depends on whether we've even been taught to grow the skills of our window of tolerance, to increase our capacity for resiliency and regulation in that way. When we fall out of our window of tolerance is when we pass our threshold, like when we no longer feel the ability to meet life with that state of flexibility, presence, and connection. And that's when we fall into either a state of hyperarousal or hypoarousal, which I'm sure many of you have heard these terms before. But hyperarousal is really when we go into a state of too much activation.
It's that fight or flight.
Yes, that you can think about that absolutely as fight or flight. And so in that state, often our breath rate increases, our temperature might increase. It's preparing us for action, right? We can often feel muscle tension. It can present as impulsivity, urgency, irritation. So just to name a few of the ways that can show up.
And as Adriana is speaking, as an educator, you might be hearing some behaviors that are showing up in your classroom and being like, oh, they're just in a state of hyperarousal. They're not actually bad kids or don't care about school or, completely checked out. Actually, they're in a dysregulated state and their nervous system is out of balance, right?
Yeah. And hearing you say that just brings me, there's often so many spaces in education where it's tempting or easy to think like, why is this so hard for them? Just get it together. Like stop having an attitude, stop having the tantrum, whatever it is. And yet, like we have to ask ourselves, like, what's the environment these kids are growing up in? Like we learn to regulate based on what is modeled for us. Like we learn as children, the only way we learn to regulate is through the co-regulation of our caregivers. And so if our caregivers were actually co-dysregulating with us, that's how they're learning that's how they're learning to respond. And that's showing up in the classroom.
And that question that you just asked is literally trauma-informed teaching in action, right? I think so often we ask, what's wrong with you? Versus what's happening to you. And that is a completely different question that either puts us in like a not trauma-informed approach or a trauma-informed approach, which is really trying to understand, where is this coming from? And with that information, we can actually respond in a way that's more supportive and addresses what the need is in the moment.
Right. And what's needed for this nervous system to come back to a state of safety, connection, flexibility, presence, rather than how do I manage this or shut it down.
So you talked about hyperarousal, that fight, flight. Tell us about the opposite side of the spectrum, hypoarousal.
So hypoarousal is, you can think about that as freeze. Fawn is also another way that freeze can express. And it's often what happens when the nervous system perceives so much, a level of danger that's inescapable or overwhelming. And so it goes into a state of withdrawal or collapse, shutdown. And so that can look like a student who seems completely absent or in another world. Maybe it looks like they look like they're on the opposite end of a football field instead of actually being 2 feet in front of you while you're talking to them. And both of these, hypo and hyper, are examples of where we go when we fall out of our window of tolerance. And so regulation is about when we fall out of our window of tolerance, what can we do to bring ourselves back to that place?
So I want to go there for a second, because if I'm in a state of fight or flight and I'm like, that kind of energy, I'm going to need something completely different than if I'm shut down, numb, disengaged.
Yep.
So let's start with, what are some practices? And we have so many of these that you and I have co-created for our master's program and in our trainings, but let's just share a couple of our favorites. Like, what are some ways that you might advise people address the hyperarousal, that fight or
Mhm.
flight? What are just some simple
Yeah.
simple practices that you might
Yeah, so if you think
teach?
about hyperarousal as too much mobilization, it's like too much activation, too much energy, then what we need is to actually uh, give both. Sometimes we need different things, right? It's not even in hyper, it's not a one size fits all. Sometimes the energy needs to move with a little bit more movement, we'll say, and sometimes it actually gets released with slower, more grounding energy. And so an example of that might be just actually taking some slow breaths and really emphasizing the exhale, because the exhales are connected. When we elongate our exhales, it actually activates our parasympathetic nervous system, which is all about rest and digest and helps us come back to that place of connection to our window of tolerance. So that would be an example if someone's in hyperarousal. And for hypoarousal, oftentimes people need actually a little bit more activation, right? There's so little activation. So they need more activation, but not in a way that's going to overwhelm their nervous systems. And this is a mistake that happens a lot in education where it's like, okay, let me have you, everybody, like,
Let's have a dance party.
let's have a dance party, or everybody just start taking really intense breaths in order to like boost the energy.
Or mindful movement really quickly. Yeah.
But for someone who's in a state of hypoarousal, that can feel completely overstimulating and actually keep them or deepen the state that they're in. And so keeping with breath as an example, very, very simple practice that you can do to support someone in that state and coming back into their window of tolerance is to switch the direction of the breath. So to actually emphasize or elongate the inhale, because when we elongate the inhale, we're actually activating more energy in the body, but we're doing it in a way that's not overwhelming, that allows them to stay connected. So such simple practices and yet so profound, and it requires us as educators to be deeply attuned to what our students need moment to moment.
So it's attuning within and it's attuning
Yeah.
outside within our context. And so you mentioned this earlier, and I want to just bring it to the surface. You talked about how regulation has so much to do with co-regulation, for better or for worse. And so can you just bridge that connection? Because co-regulation is that fourth competency that comes after regulation.
Yeah, I mean, co-regulation is really like, I mean, we have, every single human has an electromagnetic field around them, and our electromagnetic fields are always interacting. Our nervous systems are always interacting with each other. So even when we think our thoughts, our feelings aren't private, or are private, excuse me, they're not. They're being experienced on subtle levels. And so when we talk about co-regulation, we're actually talking about how do we use our nervous systems to actually support the regulation of another human? And this is happening all of the time. And as educators, it's an incredibly profound capacity to develop, both to have awareness that this is happening, whether we want it to be or not. We're either dysregulating or we're co-regulating, and to bring attention to how we can, through our own process of cultivating our capacity for regulation, how we can become anchors for our students, for them to co-regulate to us. So even no matter what they're learning in their homes, no matter what's being modeled to them, they get to come into our classrooms and feel what it's like to co-regulate to a nervous system that's steady.
And the research actually shows, I find this so interesting, that children whose brains are still developing, they are even more attuned to the regulation or dysregulation of an adult. So every moment that we are engaging or interacting with our students is an opportunity for them to learn regulation through you. It's transformative. And all of this at the end of the day is really about vitality. So for the educators that are listening today, doing their absolute best, changing the world, and likely experiencing stress, overwhelm, burnout, and whatever it is that they're experiencing, what's like your advice for how do you start small when it comes to enhancing your somatic intelligence?
Yeah, I mean, it might sound obvious, but we have to start with the foundations, and the foundations include like are you rested? Like, are you sleeping enough? How are you feeding your body? Are you hydrated? Um, because without those, it becomes a lot harder to really even stay connected to ourselves. Like, if we're not doing those things, it tends to put us into a dysregulated state. So, just simply starting with those foundations is number one. And number two is finding daily practices or rituals that allow you to weave these competencies into your daily life. So, it's not just a course that you took, it's not just a podcast that you listen to, but it's instead a way of being, a way of operating in your life that allows you to consistently keep that field of yours internally clear and bright so your life force energy, your vitality can flow freely.
And the beauty of this is that when we take care of our bodies, when we enhance our somatic intelligence, it absolutely improves our intelligence across the other layers, right? Our emotional intelligence improves because we feel better emotionally because our bodies are taken care of. Our mental health improves, right? Our thoughts become more positive and supportive. Our relational intelligence improves because we can show up more fully in our relationships, right? We're regulated. And then our universal intelligence improves because we feel more connected to our purpose because we have vitality. And so all of this is so interconnected. And when you actually pay attention to your body and you give your body the love and the care that it deserves, like you said, Adriana, I mean, your whole life can change.
And I think I just want to say, like, sometimes if you feel really far away from this, it's not about completely turning your life inside out and making a 80-degree shift in how you're living. It's like, what's the 1-degree pivot that you can make in your life to start integrating this in a way that's sustainable and that feels achievable? And like, our brains have the capacity to rewire. Like, that's neuroplasticity 101, right? Like, what fires together wires together. And the beautiful thing about that is that we can rewire transform old ways of being into new ways of being that support vitality in our day-to-day.
Well, I just want to thank you because you've totally helped rewire my brain ever since I met you, and especially most recently with all the work that we've done in co-creating the somatic intelligence curriculum and these practices that then you've coached me in embodying myself. Wow, it's made such a big difference. And I'm so grateful for the thousands and eventually millions of educators who are going to have access to your work as a result of what you've contributed. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your heart and your experience with us. It means the world.
It's such a treat. And it feels like such a gift to get to both collaborate with you in this way and also just continue on this journey of somatic intelligence. Yeah.
Totally.
Thank you for having me. Love you too.